Joy, 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 joy.
Welcome to Joy Lie.
If you don't know what that is.
Kristina's birthday month.
Also known as Kristina's birthday month. If you don't know what Joy Lie is, don't worry. I made it up. And we're going to be talking about it right now. Some of you are in summer, some of you are in winter, depending on which hemisphere you're on. But it's time to look at what really brings joy. Not happiness, not fulfillment, not contentment, but joy. So we're going to do a bit of a boozy brunch break this time and have that conversation, aren't we, Raquelle?
Yes, ma'am. And it's a good one.
It really is. It's just us this time, and we hope that you enjoy it. Enjoy!
Enjoy your Joy Lie.
You're listening to Bombshell Brunches, where your hosts Raquelle Rudenberg and Kristina Lau sip and spill with badass babes every Tuesday morning.
Joy!
Lie!
Joy lie! Joy lie! Welcome. We're joy hunting today. We're having a little bit of a boozy brunch. We've already been chatting for 3 hours, and we thought we'd just loop you into the conversation. BBs. Welcome. I don't know what it's like on your side of the world, but I'm sweltering. It is extremely hot. I am in a small space, and I'm losing water weight quickly, which is why I have, quote unquote, orange juice to help me.
Sick.
maybe a little mimosa. We're talking about joy today. We're talking about joy hunting. I introduced Raquelle and quite a few others to my concept of Joy Lie, which it is the month of July. This is my life right now. I wake up and I stop just before I start doing all the things that I normally do, which is very structured and schedule based. And I say, how do I feel right now? And is what I was going to do next going to make me joyful? And then I either do it or don't do it. And it sounds really easy, but babes, as I'm telling you, it has been like every single day has been so much harder for me so far because I'm so used to my neural pathways being in a certain mindset and a certain mode, and they just want the path of least resistance. So actively hunting joy is a hunt for me. And so I wanted to share that. And so we're going to have that conversation now.
Yes. And I've taken it a step further. So I have the summer of madness, AKA sanity, where I'm coming home because I have hit full on burnout level with, as my master's finished up, moving from here, having to find a new home, dealing with COVID, quarantine in Canada, coming home for the summer. And then we have so many epic, exciting, amazing things happening with Bombshells that we can't wait to talk to you guys about. We're so excited to tell you guys about it. Not going to do it today, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of stuff on the go. And I just decided that I was going to container things. So kind of similar. I do usually wake up and say, how do I feel? And then kind of schedule it. I have like a loose structure. So I'll have like, let's say 3 to 5 main things that I have to get done that day. Everything else can be movable. And then maybe there's like a chunk of the day that those things have to happen within, and everything else is movable. I try to leave space for movability. But I took most of this last week to just be free. So sometimes I am up until 4 a.m. Sometimes I wake up at 11, decide to bike to another city. Sometimes I do something else. And it has been epic, my friend. We are joy hunting.
I want to talk about staying up for just a second, just to hark back to Dusty Bones. I don't know about you, but right now, me being like, I'm going to stay up till 2 a.m, I get to like 10 o'clock and I'm like, I I don't know what I was thinking. I'm tired. I'm going to go to sleep. And everyone else, other people I see, I hear noises of other humans awake. And I'm like, what? I'm tired. I'm tired. A friend of mine and I went to the Van Gogh like immersive experience the other day, and he texted me. G texted me and said, hey, I've got 2 tickets for this. And I was like, immediately I was like, Joy, I've been wanting to go to this for ages. And he was like, I think it's at 10 o'clock at night. And I was like,
it's past your bedtime. And
I was like, am I that person now? Am I that person that is like, I have been wanting to go to the Van Gogh Museum for months. Not the museum, the immersive experience. The museum is in Amsterdam, and I've been there, and I loved it.
Yes.
And I spent hours and hours there in the daytime at 9 a.m. At 9 a.m. And then I got the whole day, and I was like, oh, I'll take the audio
Did COVID
guide.
make you a granny? Because I feel like before COVID, you went out a lot. And
no, that didn't happen. No.
Did it just appear that way to me? Did I just assume that that's who you are?
Yes.
You've always been a granny?
People, no. What I did was start as we started bombshells and biohacking and listening to different people talk about our body clocks. I was like, oh, I'm most productive at this time. So sometimes I will stay up until 2-3 in the morning. Yeah. If I am out, if there's like, the wind has taken me somewhere and I'm like on a beach randomly.
It feels good. You go with it.
Yeah, I go with it, but it's hard. Now I can't preemptively go with it. Like if it happens to me.
Yes. Okay. That is the clincher though. Okay. I will never make late plans like that anymore. But my partner just got here from South Africa. We've been spending time together before we go back to Canada. And I can't tell you the energy in the city. So Amsterdam, just so you guys know, like really opened up right when I got back from South Africa. So full on like restaurants are open, terraces are open, you name it. And all of this stuff that I've been here all year, everything's been shut down. The museums are back open. Everything I love about the city is back open. I mean, I love the city, but all of these fun things. So we're out. And I'm not even kidding you. We'll be bicycling around, having a blast. There's lights everywhere because it's a city. And you're just having an amazing time exploring different parts of the city. And you look at your clock, you get home, you're like, I'm so hungry. 4 a.m.
Okay.
4 a.m. And I'm like, what is happening to us? Because I used to be such a granny. I was like, oh, it's 10, 11 p.m. Time to But this city, it's electric.
I think it depends on where you are as well, right? Like Vancouver is opening up again, but most of the activities that happen in the day are in the daytime are really like sports based. Like I'm really physically active at the moment. So I'm out on beaches in the sunshine. I just had the most decadent like girls trip away for a friend's birthday. And, we were just out on a lake, so by 10 o'clock at night, we're like, well, we are now like, we've fully photosynthesized. And so we're full of like wine and happiness and we're done. Like that's, that was it. But coming back to that concept of joy and how you find it and how your body responds to it. The reason I wanted to start was because, I was so full that I remember saying to you, my schedule is on 15-minute intervals. And so I have 15 minutes to like get to the next thing. I have 15 minutes to speak to someone on the phone. I have 15 minutes to call my friend and on the other side of the world and say, hey, I've got 15 minutes to chat, or I'm going to leave you a voice note because I don't have any more time. And I reached, very well, I kind of dance the line of burning out, not burning out, melting, not melting. Mm-hmm. And this podcast has been huge for me in terms of learning how to regulate that and to prevent that from happening. And we have some amazing guests that I would highly encourage you to go back over and have a listen to when it comes to setting good boundaries and having good burnout understanding within your own body. But I wanted to do an individual social experiment and take away all of my schedule for the whole of July, which is my birthday month. And so I was like, right, I am one of those people that, if you've ever read Gabor Mate's In the Realm of the Hungry Ghosts, I feel like I have a very addictive personality. So structures can be very helpful for me to keep me on track. The problem with structures is that I can overstructure. And that was what I was doing. So I wanted to be brave and to live fuller. I decided I needed to make more space and not have and sit in what's uncomfortable. And what's uncomfortable is not having any structure in July. So I'm now at the point where people are like, oh, okay, well, but then how do I plan with you for like tomorrow or for next week? And I'm like, I don't know how to answer that question either. So it's an interesting one that I wanted to bring up to all of you, everyone listening, because my question to all of you is, how do you find your joy? What do you think your joy is? What is sustainable joy? And how do you know when you're actually achieving it rather than when you think you are, but you're really just perpetuating the same behaviors that you had before? Lots of questions.
Oh, those are good questions. I think what is joy is a really, really good one too. Because I almost feel like when you're joy hunting, you almost don't quite know what you're looking for. Like when you need joy the most, when you need to sit back and find joy in your life, those moments that are uber stressful, uber full, you've got stuff going on, health of family members, relationship issues, all of those big things that can make massive impacts on your life. When those things are going on and everything feels like it's out of your control, it can be really, really tough. That's when I find it the most tough to find joy. And also to even remember what that feeling is.
Well, what's the difference between joy and happiness? I think the definition is joy is like greater happiness. But a lot of people people think that joy is like living in the state of being euphoric all the time, which is also not healthy. So,
okay.
Well, I mean, when we talk about what happiness is and what joy is, I agree. I fully agree with you. I think that you can't necessarily, I've been saying this recently, I don't want to be so arrogant as to think that I know what's best for me. And I think with joy, you're 100% right. Like there's something intangible about it that we can't control, which is why it's joyous, because it's like a combination of surprise, delight, intrigue, inspiration. It's like this little concoction. It's like a cocktail of happinesses,
It's interesting that you say that, because I almost think about it the opposite. So when I think about it, I think of joy as very fleeting. It is presence and being in the moment. And happiness, I think most people look at it as like happy life, happy relationship. It's like the longer term, I'm happy in my work. It's the consistency, the up and down, the average of. Whereas joy, I think, is only found when you are absolutely present in the moment. You have fully let go of anything else you have to do in the day, in the week, in the year. And you are connecting with another human. You're connecting with nature. You're enjoying food. You're making love to food. You're having...
That sounds so wrong. Never say that again. Let's just take that
figuratively
and not think about it. Let's not be in that moment. Raquelle, I don't want to be there.
Love the nachos. Love them. Whatever it is.
Love them.
Oh my gosh.
Love them.
Love it. Really enjoy it and be fully present. Don't let those future problems, the past problems, the problems that are happening next door, at your neighbors, at your coworkers, whatever, wherever it's happening, let it go. Be fully present. Enjoy every sensory detail of that moment. To me, that is joy. Happiness is overall on average, how good are you in that day, week, month, year?
Right.
I don't know. That's just my own personal take on it.
Yeah, see, it is interesting. And you know what? We Googled this and I couldn't find very many definitions for joy.
No.
Like, I think it's such a subjective term, which is, we're not joy experts. But, we're hunting, we're joy hunters. And I want to spend that time now just kind of unpacking what that means. But I do agree with you on the happiness side, where it's like, yeah, I would buy that it's like a longer term thing. But I've also had a lot of conversations with people that are like, I don't really aspire to be happy. Like I'm okay with being content.
Oh, okay.
Right.
You know what? I think that's fair, because I think sometimes happiness comes with risk. And I think some people don't feel maybe that they want to take those risks because you're also risking unhappiness.
Right.
So
well, and I also think it's semantics, though. I mean, I think this is where we talk a lot about the language behind things and how we describe them. How we describe our words in our mind compared to how I consider, if I say, yeah, I'm happy, whereas you might call my happiness joy, because I have a more manic style personality, I think, where I can be extremely happy, very excited, and then super drained very, very quickly. And I think that's these are the series of questions I just want to kind of, it's almost like this is like a thought podcast, a thought show, a thought series of like, okay, actually, how does this sit with you when you think about what's my happiness and what's my joy? And I wanted joy over happiness because I wanted to feel, here it is. I wanted to feel the moment of joy that I find in those really granular, present situations. And I wanted to find how I can make that as sustainable as possible while everything else is still happening around me. Because I think when I go for happiness, and I speak a lot about having fulfillment and having a full life, and I do a lot of that in my work. How do I help people to understand what they have to do in order to get what they want to do? And when I think about that, I'm like, okay, but sometimes we can get so caught up in the pursuit of happiness that we forget what our real joy is, because we're not taking enough time or space, like you said earlier, to be really present. And what I found was I know what my happy mechanisms are. I know what makes me happy. I know I love to sing. I know I love my acting. I know I love, the career pathway work that I do. I know I love my advocacy. But those things make me happy, but they weren't bringing me joy.
Oh, okay. So this really reminds me of Eckhart Tolle's book. And in it, he talks about there being seasons, essentially. I'm paraphrasing, but essentially he talks about how there's seasons. So there are times, and we're always, like, as a society, I say we tend to hunt for happiness. Like you said, there's this constant pursuit of happiness. But he talks about the importance of those moments in your life where there's stagnant energy, where you're not coming up with those creative ideas. You actually need those to replenish that energy. You need those moments of quiet, those moments of
being bored.
Yeah,
there's a TED talk about being bored, the science of being bored. There's a lot about it.
You don't need to force it. You don't need to schedule it. You don't need to force it to happen. But there are times in your life where you are meant to just go with the flow. There are times in your life where you're meant to spearhead something and chase after it with all of your might. There are times that you're meant to be super creative, and you just need to sit in those moments and let those happen. And then I think what you're talking about with joy, it's sitting in those moments, because those are the longer term periods. Maybe it's a week, month, year, whatever it is, but finding those daily joys and letting it balance out. And that's the hard part is there's no perfect answer.
Well, there's no universal answer.
There's no universal answer.
I think that would be what I'm learning is there's, what we've learned through doing this show and speaking with all the people we've spoken to is what I've learned more than anything is how to listen more to my responses to the subject matter. So I take a piece of information and I say, okay, where does that fit in my life right now? And how does that sit? How does that sit with my thoughts on a cognitive level, on a soul level, and on an instinctual level? How do these things sit with me? And I think one of the things about joy lie, and it's funny because I've had this conversation with maybe 10 people, and every single one of them has either said, I love and respect that you're doing it, or I think I'm going to do that too. And we surround ourselves with pretty fierce, very passionate, very ambitious people. And these people are so good at getting what they want. And I realized that I was the type of person that am also very good at getting what I want, but not taking enough time to establish when that might change. Because what I'll do is say, this is what I am. This is what brings me the most joy and happiness. And now I'm going for it and I'm going to super go for it. And then I don't create enough space to be bored or to be, or to just be on my own, to let what I keep saying right now, let what is for me get to me. Let what is meant for me to get to me. And I just changed that saying recently to what I'd like to do in July is let what's best for me get to me. And that takes even more space.
Because you're not trying to force it, you mean? It's hard.
But there's a season. I think Eckhart Tolle was right. There's a season.
Yeah. And you're totally on point because I talk to a lot of people about goals, and I think a lot of people have this idea. It's either here nor it's one way or the other. But I find a lot of people get so locked in on this goal. They're like, I'm going to make this goal happen. You have to have that mentality. You do. You have to gun for it. But you also have to think of your life like water. It flows. And sometimes there just might be a block and you might not get exactly what you thought you wanted. But what you're saying is exactly right. Sometimes what you thought you wanted wasn't actually the right thing for you. And now I feel like I sound like a Hallmark card, but it is so true. It is so true.
Hallmark's great. Shout out to Hallmark.
Is great. It is great. See, it's got the motivation, the advice. We should just make a whole episode made off Hallmark cards, like buy a bunch and then pair it together.
Oh my gosh, that would be amazing.
Like this.
Just pull out new. You're exactly the person you should be. Today is going to be a great day. My condolences.
Oh my gosh, can we make a whole conversation just off Hallmark cards and do?
Can we also make a whole
Instagram
conversation
Live?
on the fact that you just said conversation?
What?
You said, can we have a whole, what was it?
Conversation.
Conversation?
Conversation.
A conversation?
Yes.
With a Z?
No, with an S.
I feel like you just said, can we have a whole conversation about this? And I was like, that is an interesting way of saying conversation.
I mean, let's be real here. I say that I'm a halfway immigrant because I grew up with immigrant grandparents so much that even though I was born in Canada, people always say that I have an accent. They're always asking me. Canadians ask me all the time where my accent is from. I swear to God, it's Omanopa. It's your fault. I love you. I enjoy it quite a bit. It starts a lot of interesting.
It does make me laugh too. And I can't judge you at all because I don't know how to pronounce certain words at all. So I'm like, is this, what was the Australian way of English way of Hong Kong way of saying,
what country
this is like,
am I from?
Where am I? What am I? And I've said phrases like that people are like, where is that phrase from? I'm like, I don't know. I don't know. Anyway, sorry. But what you were saying, we have to have a Hallmark conversation?
Yes. It's going to be all made out of cards. We can only answer each other with another card.
Oh my gosh.
It's going to happen.
I like
people.
this. Yeah. Great.
That's
It's also going to cost us $812 because Hallmark cards, but I don't want to spend. Okay. You know what does not bring me joy? What does not bring me joy is spending $8 on a card. So none of you expect to receive cards from me. You will get a postcard because I love them. But postcards are also $1.20 or,
I love postcards.
Yeah, postcards are great.
They are great.
Greeting cards are not worth $8. They're not.
Yeah.
That's a happy hour mimosa.
Oh,
I would drink that card instead, much more joyfully.
Oh, so we asked the Google, P.S., going back to joy.
Right, yes.
We asked the Google, what about happiness? What about joy? What brings happiness? What is going on with the research world, the science world on happiness? We asked all these questions. Very good questions.
They're age-old questions.
Age-old questions. I don't think anyone really has the answer, but some things kept coming up over and over. So we're going to talk about that a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it was personality type, which I think is, a little unfortunate, but there you go. Positive emotions versus negative emotions. I don't even know what that means. Attitude towards physical health. That one I think is really, really interesting and can go a lot deeper. Social class and wealth, I think makes a lot of sense. We are talking about representation. We are talking about doors that are closed. We're talking about opening doors. We're talking about equity. Huge. Attachment and relatedness, I think, is massive.
Which is that also like belonging? Is that also part of?
Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. And then goals and self-efficacy, which a lot of these things are changeable. That is what resonated with me. They
evolve.
They evolve, and in your life, and that's what a lot of what we're doing is bringing guests on that show us how we can make these changes, how we can create this room and space in our lives to be able to move forward into a life of more happiness. Like goals, self-efficacy is just, do you think you can do it? Yes.
Yeah.
Do you think you can do it?
I think it's defined as your ability to what is it? It's your belief in your ability to complete.
It's your belief in your ability to
achieve
it. Right. So we're bringing guests on and we're trying to show different ways of getting the results that you want, and showing different people who have done it and showing how possible it is and how many tools you actually have to get that stuff done.
Well, okay, we are, but it's also interesting because I'm very practical about joy hunting. I'm like, now I'm going to do nothing. And I structure that. And then the way that it gets super meta is I'm like, okay, now I'm going to do nothing. And then I stop and I'm like, wait, am I structuring my nothing? Is that wrong? Is that okay? Should I be doing that? Am I used to doing that? If I was to not structure, not doing nothing and just went with, and I then 15 minutes has passed and what has happened while everyone else is sitting around me? If you're watching this, everyone else is like, she just stopped moving. She just stopped moving. And then I'm still like, just having a nothing conversation in my own mind while other things are happening in my life, trying to drift around, but intentionally trying to drift around to not do anything. My point is, some people, they have to structure nothing. I am one of those people sometimes that has to structure nothing. Other times, things happen to me, and if I've created enough space in my lifestyle, if I've designed my life so that there is enough space, and I think you're very good at this, then I can allow those beautiful surprises in. Mm-hmm. But I will say, as a representative of the person that has a very addictive personality and likes to have structure and is very, very, very much about planning, it's not easy. It's not easy to ask the right questions of myself to find my joy, because if I'm not careful, and I wrote this down before, instead of predicating, I will medicate.
Mm-hmm, which we've talked about.
Yeah.
But P.S. Before we dive into that, Kristina got in trouble today because we had a dream meeting where we were all supposed to just come up with our pie in the sky dreams, our rainbow bucket list. This was like the quintessential Raquelle meeting. And she started trying to action plan them. She started trying to get tactical in our dream meeting. And I was like,
yeah, I like tactical
Kristina,
dreaming.
This is not the tactical meeting.
I know. You're right. And I can't help it. Like, because again, coming back down to it, and this is the thing I want to pose as a question to all of you out there. What is it that makes you feel like you are joyous in yourself versus what is it that makes you feel safety?
Yeah. And I think for you, what it is as well, and I think for a lot of people, what it is when you get tactical about it, you feel like you can let it go. There's an action plan.
Right.
Something's going to happen. So you don't have to hold that anymore. You can let it go knowing that it's going to get done or assuming that it's going to get done.
Right.
And that is difficult. And that is where structuring certain parts of your life is really important. There has to be a place for those thoughts to go, or a process where those thoughts and action plans can go.
Can go or can flow, right? Like,
right, exactly.
If we stop it, then if I stop it, then I have a problem, right? As well, where I'm like, I'm going to compartmentalize and then I'm going to super compartmentalize.
Yeah.
So I like it go or flow.
Yeah. And so, for example, we have the rainbow bucket list at Bombshells where I can do my dreaming. Kristina can do her dreaming. The team can do our dreaming. It has somewhere to go. We don't have to hold on to it. Yeah. I think that's really important. For some people, it's journaling. Wherever that is for you, putting it in your agenda, putting it in your notes in your phone, whatever it is. I think that is a really important tactical takeaway in creating space.
So tell me, creating space, let's talk about that. Like, I like these good, positive things. What are some joy hunting fails then that you've had? Because this I have had many where I'm like, I'm going to have the best day. And then every single thing that I do, I'm like, I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed. This cake is terrible. Because most of my best days involve cake.
Because, since I was a kid, my mom said this. So I was the worst joy hunter as a kid. I would have these epic ideas of what my day would look like. Epic ideas, which I don't even think like you have a problem envisioning because I'm still a little bit like that.
Yes.
And everything would go to plan, like best coffee, best class, best kindergarten. Because yes, I did have coffee at kindergarten. Best whatever. I did.
It's me drinking my super bitter coffee.
It was great.
I'm full.
And then at the end, one thing would go wrong. And my mom would pick me up and she'd be like, honey, how was your day? And I was like, it was terrible. I was not like you wouldn't recognize me. She was like double take. She was like, what's going on? And I was like, well, this thing happened great. And this thing happened great. And this thing happened great. And she's like, I'm not seeing the problem. I was like, and then Sasha said she didn't like my jacket. Or like whatever it was like something happened.
Which when you're 4, that's a really big thing.
You know what the thing is I always felt like I was so close to perfection. So close to perfection.
Oh, that doesn't sound like anything like you at all.
And one thing would happen and it was almost worse than just having a bad day because I was like, if I had a bad day, I knew it was all going to shit. But now it's like, this one thing.
That's a great joy fail. Yeah.
It was a huge joy fail and it happened for years. It was actually, it took me a lot of work to get past. There are still days.
Joy is such hard work. Like I said, it's so funny. Like your version of how you fail at joy hunting, my version is like, yesterday evening, I was like, it's Friday night. And then I just waited and I was like, 5 o'clock. It's 5 o'clock on Friday. Just going to do a little bit of work. So I did some work and I was like, okay. And then I was like, oh, I'm going to read a book. And then immediately my thoughts were like, which book are you going to read? What do you do? What are you up to? You could do this building the story by, right? And then it just goes into this like crazy bullet train of like, there could be Bombshell Brunch's work. You could do this book and you could read this book and or you could just let it all go and read this book that has nothing to do, but you shouldn't start a new book. That's not a great idea. So I'm sitting there like 5:03, like this is terrible joy hunting. But what I just said I wanted to read a book. That's all I said. But then I took another step back. And this was the interesting thing is I was like, okay, I'm just going to call someone and see what they're doing. And that's when I realized that I use socializing as medicating a lot of the time. And I was like, oh, well, I hark back to my last joy moment. And that last, like some of those moments were with friends or with people that I love. And I was like, oh, I'm really in the moment with these people at this time. So I should call someone or be social or call this person I haven't spoken to or whatever it is. But what was happening is I was realizing that I wasn't sitting long enough in the boredom to actually go out and just be present. So what I did in the end was I worked until 7:00 and then I just went, I'm going for a walk. And immediately I was like, well, I could go and do this. I could buy my shopping. I could do this other thing. And so me and my thoughts were sitting there and I was like, okay, thoughts, we have to calm down now. I'm going to go for a walk and not do anything. I did do some food shopping, but not do anything else intentionally, although I did bring a bag in case I did decide to do food shopping. And so I went for this walk, came back, and then turned my lights off and just danced in the darkness for like 35, 40 minutes. And if anyone was watching it, you would probably not have a great time because it was strangely geometric. It was strangely angular, my dancing yesterday. But it was what it was. And then I went to sleep. And I then fought myself all the way into falling asleep as to why that was important to do. That's how steeped I am in my behaviors. To be able to be like, I'm just going to do nothing was harder for me than doing a million things.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
Is there?
There is. And you know what? I feel you because some days I wake up. For me, it's been a really hard transition from living alone again, because the last number of months, 6 months during the pandemic, I was living alone from living with my partner. And now he's back with me again. We're about to go to Canada and we're together again. And I have really loved my routine, which is not overly scheduled. And I do things at my own pace. I've gotten really, 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 really good over the last number of months at just really listening to my intuition.
Mm-hmm.
I leave the house and sometimes I don't come home for 4 hours. I just walk. I walk in a direction I want. I cannot tell you how many times over this trip I have told him oh, I really want to take you to this, and this space. Some of them I've never been to in my life. We walk and we wind up at that space. Weird. Just like my heart is guiding us to wherever we need to go. Very strong link to my intuition. But having someone else here with me, it mixes that energy. And I think that's a really important discussion about being with a partner or a roommate or whatever, just even having another person.
Just having or family, still living with your family.
Yes,
or
living with your family. Even a pet, I think, can sometimes do that, right? Their needs and it really does change the dynamic. If you have kids, of course, that would be a big one. It really, really changes the dynamic. And that's something that I'm trying to learn to do. And I've never been super great at. I'm really good alone at being intuitive.
That's such a great point. Yeah. But
I'm not great I'm great in a relationship. I'm not great at I don't know, being as
transferring it.
Well, yeah, it's I think too much about them maybe.
Yeah, I think this is also, a female lived experience, that feeling of wanting to nurture. I mean, I've had this conversation in previous relationships, in every capacity, friendships and intimate relationships and continue to try and navigate communication around how to be your most authentic self and let other people be theirs and coexist. I have not figured that out to the extent that I'd like to. But I think we also, that brings us to kind of the uncomfortable conversation of articulating joy. And what you want right now in your joy. And I did a project with a friend that was all based on vulnerability. And I said in it, I just rewatched it again the other day, and I said in it, I don't find it practical to be vulnerable. I don't find it helpful to be vulnerable, which is a really difficult, and someone else said to me when they were providing feedback on what they thought of that episode, they were like, I feel pity for you when you say that. Wow. And I was like, oh, wow. Why is that? And they were like, well, because you don't want to be vulnerable because you don't think it's helpful. You don't think it's just, you don't think it serves other people. So you don't want to be it. And I was like, wow, that's a really interesting comment, but interesting commentary on how I feel towards being a certain way, because I'm consciously looking at how it will impact other people. And so when we look at our joy, often I think when I see people, I see a lot of friends of mine who have kids, and they say, well, I'm putting my kids first. And I read an article recently when I was looking at the joy hunting, and I was like, well, how many parents are saying this is all joy and no fun? It was one article that said that. And I was like, that's such a good point, where it's like, oh, my kids bring me so much joy, but I'm not having any fun anymore.
Oh my God.
Right?
I literally just had this discussion with my partner, and I was telling him, I was like, I'm terrified of having kids because I hear certain people, whether it's like in articles or talking to people or books that I've read or movies that I've watched, whatever it is, where I've seen people lose their happiness.
Right. Their own personal joy.
Yes. And, the biggest thing that I was raised with, my mom always said, she needs to be happy. She needs to be happy to make me happy.
Yeah.
So even though I hated when she went to the gym and I had to go to like the little kid area, whatever it was, and I put up a fuss, like she religiously did it because she was going to show up better and she needed to put that first. But had she not done that, she would have been not the best version of herself. And I would have been suffering in the end.
It's funny because my dad did the same, where he would actively say, if I am not healthy, and that's why he then went and did 11 Ironman triathlons.
Amazing.
Because he was like, I'm going to be super healthy. Like I am going to push myself to my limits and challenge myself constantly. Because if I am not at the top of my game, then you won't be. I won't be able to provide for you what I want you to have. And but that looked very different to Mum.
Yeah.
Because Mum, as any of you who've listened to Mum Allows podcast, she comes from a place of heart joy where she's like, my joy is in you and I will take whatever I need to do to make your life and the people's lives around me beautiful. And that brings me joy. And it's a different type of joy.
And I think what you said earlier about having those conversations.
Sorry, having the
conversations
is what you just said.
I told you.
Other people are listening to this. Other people can back me up on this.
It's fine. I like it. I enjoy my version.
It's baby Rack talking.
It's baby Rack. But I think that is so important. That's something that has been kind of circulating in my mind recently, especially, I did talk to my partner. I said, what happens if I get to that point? What happens if I get there? And I just didn't realize it. If I just let myself get there, he said, then we need to stop. We need to take a look at it and we need to figure out what's going to bring you happiness. That is something that needs to be discussed. But I think so many people don't.
There's a great podcast. If you don't listen to, my friend Katie mentioned it to me. It's Jay Shetty's podcast.
Okay,
He interviews someone, and the book is Think Again, and they talk about doing regular check-ins. Like we don't do that. When people say that, one of my biggest anti-joys is when people say, this is how I am. That's just how I am.
Oh,
is one of my
totally
biggest
immovable.
It's just like, this is how I am. Oh, okay, great. Well, then, I mean, I'm grateful because my addictive, structure-loving personality now knows exactly where to put you.
Yeah.
But that also means that I'm going to inevitably outgrow you.
Yes, absolutely.
If I'm being my version of myself, but then the opposite side of it, and going back to that vulnerability piece that I did with my friend, was realizing that it's actually really hard to say, hey, I'm going to be really vulnerable and tell you where I'm at right now, in the conviction that I have, knowing that it could and probably will change. And it might change for the better. It might change for the worse. But I'm going to just say mine, but my construct of what safety is largely based on the perception of control. So when I exercise that, I remove joy because it's unsafe. And so this last month, when I made that decision, when I was like, I can keep doing this and I can keep existing. And this is again why one reason that I walked away from the boards. I'd finished the work that I wanted to do. It brought me a lot of happiness, but it wasn't joyous anymore because I could see that what I wanted to achieve there was done.
Yeah.
And so really coming back into like that podcast, what you just said, saying, and when people say, people don't believe in marriage anymore, the concept of being together all like for the rest of your lives is gone. It's such a shame. And I'm like, well, it is and it isn't, because I would love more than anything to just be done and be like, I've made a commitment and I'm finished. But the reality is that's me deciding that I know who I'm going to be and who they are going to be in 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years. That's me, again, exercising control rather than me taking a leap of faith and putting full commitment into that faith. And I think that's where, coming back to how we as a society, especially in this part of the world, in colonial parts of the world, we're built into a construct that is very hierarchical. It's very top down. It's very authoritative. We have A plus B equals C. We have these formulas, but we don't, and so it's very hard to deconstruct that because there are otherwise too many thoughts in the world to try and piece together your existence. But I think one of the things that I love about Bombshells is that we constantly are introducing and challenging each other on ways of thinking that aren't top down, that aren't just, this is what was, so this is what will be.
Yeah.
And so joy comes from that, but how that comes out is going to change for all of you and all of us every month, every year.
Yeah. And I think one of the things you touched on when you start talking about like monogamy and things like that is accepting, and this is not just for relationships, but with friendships or partnerships, but with friendships, you name it, family, accepting that people are flawed, accepting that people have their own traumas, backgrounds, you name it, things that they're dealing with, expecting that and accepting that people change and that's okay.
Normalizing change.
And that environments change and that opinions change and that sex drive changes and that goals change and hormones change. Everything changes. And obviously a lot of people, their goal is to find someone that they can change with, but it's not always going to happen at the same time.
And it's not always going to happen the way you want it to.
No. How many times do you have a best friend? I mean, I know both of us have had this. I know my parents and probably your parents have had this. Your best friend moves across the world. What are you going to be mad because they moved across the world? Like, no, you're going to be excited for them because they're pursuing their goals and you're going to maneuver. Your relationship will change. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll be the same when you see each other. Maybe you'll see each other less. But you need to be accepting that you don't need to be. But I think in finding joy, part of that is being able to accept the fluidity of life.
Well, yeah. And I think as you were saying that, one of the things that really pops up for me is happiness can be conditional.
Mm-hmm.
Joy is unconditional.
Yes.
And I think that to me is what I've been learning about love. About, in Greek, there are like how many words for the word love that mean different
How many?
things? I don't know.
Oh,
There are
but there's a
many.
lot.
There are a lot of different expressions of the word love. In English, we have one, right? And so, our language is relatively very young. Our primary language that you and I use is very, very young. And it in and of itself is evolving. And so one thing that I've been challenging a lot in where my heart is at as I live and work on, unceded lands in a colonial society that I am both a product and victim of simultaneously. I am trying my best to challenge my conditionality, I guess, or my conditionalism. I don't know what the right word is for it, but I want to remove those conditions, because when I have conditions, let's say even with bombshells, if I put too many expectations on what I want it to be and how it has to become that, then it sucks the joy out. Whereas if, and I do love that about you as much as I don't in the moment, because it freaks me out. But when you say these things where you're like, we can be this and we can do this and we can create these things, I love it because it doesn't have a condition. Because then we get the experience is how. Yeah. And I think what I was doing in June before I decided to hit Joy Lie, and really hit that ground running with this month of descheduling, as I call it. What I had done is conditionalize my happiness. And I was like, if I do this, then that's the right thing to do. If I do this, then I'm contributing to society. I am adding value to these people. I am worthy. I am worth it. I am doing this stuff. If this, then that. And joy, I've been working with Larry a lot about on it, because every time we talk, he's like, yeah, well, you don't have to make that decision right now. You don't have to have an answer to it. Joy is becoming unconditional in whatever way you've decided is important for you right now. And that could be as simple as saying, Friday mornings, my kids go to childcare and I figure out how to save some money from X, Y, and Z to make that happen so that I can go to a spin class or do what I want to do or take a creative writing course. Joy might look like you not spending a dime and taking 20 minutes once a week to stare at a wall. That's literally what I do when I'm really struggling to make a decision on how to be joyous. I just do nothing for 20 minutes. I just sit there and do nothing.
Yeah. And just think, I completely agree with that. Sometimes for me, it looks like going to a coffee shop, like a nice vibed coffee shop with nothing, no phone, no laptop, no electronics, just a nice little journal and a pen. And I just write down my thoughts, and page by page, I get closer and closer and closer to what I'm looking for. I'm not your normal journaler where I do a daily journal, but when it comes to like coming up with a big decision, that is, I find something that's really helpful. Sometimes for me, it's just going and watching the ducks. I don't know why. Since I've been in Amsterdam, there's some really cute ducks here. But there's a part. No. It actually, funny enough. So when I listened to Eckhart Tolle, it was through an audiobook. And so I'd be on these walks listening to him. And I remember walking past, there's canals here everywhere. So there's water everywhere. And so I'm walking along these canals, and he starts talking about when you have problems in your life, when you're trying to find joy, funny enough for this conversation, think about life as a duck. Watch the ducks, because the ducks, if you see another duck come into the duck's area, he's upset. He's like, get out of my area. I'm protective. This is my area. Go away. He gets upset. The other duck leaves, or they get in a little duck scrap, whatever it is. They leave each other at the end of it and they let it go. That's it. They did the thing. They let it go. They don't continue thinking about that duck. They're over it. They're not like 3 days later, like, yeah, that duck, I really told him. Like, the humans are so bad.
Remember that duck? Remember that time I fought that other duck?
They just let it go. They're like, okay, we're good. That's why there's like, what is it? Water off a duck's back. The saying is there for a reason. And I find myself coming back to that quite a bit recently. But it's true. It's just letting it go sometimes. And there is joy in release. There is joy in just letting things go, letting things vibe, letting things happen, which I think is what you're talking about, creating space in your July to just let things happen the way they were supposed to, the way they're going to.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. And I think this is my, my challenge for everybody else out there. The hardest thing to do, for me, this is my experience, but I always want someone to provide me with a very easy solution. That's what I want. I want someone to say, do this, and then this will happen, because it feels safe. Because I'm like, oh, okay, if I just listen to that, then I'll do it. But my challenge to you, as I am challenging myself with exactly the same thing, is to take a step back and be that person for you. So for me, what I needed this month, the hardest thing that I could think of doing that I felt very resistant to was taking away my schedule. My question to all of you is, what is it that is going to make you feel uncomfortable, but create a bunch of space? And then decide what it is that how it is that looks for you, and try it for whether it's a week or a month, or, I always recommend that people do things for at least, 3 or 4 weeks. But whatever that looks like, and if your response to this is, oh, well, I don't need to do anything, or that's not going to work for me, then you're already one step towards figuring out what it is you need to shift to be able to make some space for some new joy.
I love it. And I think finding gratitude and feeling, when we talked to Kinney a long time ago, if you guys haven't heard that episode, it's way at the beginning.
Oh, it's amazing.
She talked about the awe of nature, and I couldn't agree with that more. I don't think you have to be in nature necessarily, but there is something awe-inspiring about being in nature. And it could be your local park. It does not have to be, you don't have to drive an hour to some mountain. You can just be by some grass, see some animals, whatever it is, let the wind flow. Just try to be super present and let that feeling wash over you. Because the moment you are, it is impossible. Try it. See if you can prove me wrong.
Try.
Challenge. You cannot think about the future. You cannot think about the past when you are fully present.
Yeah.
And if you can feel all of the senses, you are fully present. So everything else can be let go.
I'll let you know when I figure that out. In the meantime, I climb a mountain that puffs me out so much that I can't think about the past or present, because all I'm doing is trying to survive. That's my version of nature right now. I have to short circuit my.
I think that's survival mode, but I mean,
I mean, yes and no. But again, this is where I think it's interesting to see the diversity of our natures, right? And then also to acknowledge for me that what you just said makes me feel very resistant. And that's the thing that I need to do more, is to just sit and be like, I'm present until I get there. Because I'm so used to achieving presence through something else. And that something else means I have to short circuit one part of my body, mind, brain, whatever it is, in order to feel fully present. And for those who are artists, same with being on stage, same with being on screen. Nothing else can exist. I am fully present. That's what I mean about running up the mountain, because it's like, well, you're fully engaged in one way so much that it's taxing everything else about you. And I think the challenge right now is when you find joy, that can happen, but you can get addicted to doing it in other ways that aren't holistic ways. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where a lot of people, I know people who have been on stage for most of their life and they are thoroughly down when they can't be on that stage, because that is their attainment of presence. And finding inner presence that can happen regardless of circumstance or condition is probably the closest we're going to get to joy.
Mm-hmm.
Good.
Well,
good chat.
On that note.
On that note, thanks, BBs, for listening to our boozy brunch today. We finished our mimosas. You had what, rum?
It's evening for me.
It's
Don't
evening.
make me sound like an alcoholic.
It's 1:45 for me. It's fine. I've had a mimosa. It's good. Okay. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks for listening, bombshells. In order to continue to elevate, subscribe and don't forget to click that little bell so you can get notified every time we have a new badass brunch. Until next time, stay focused, fierce, and fabulous.